Noam Chomsky's The Culture of Terrorism is not a light read, it's a searing indictment of U.S. foreign policy. Chomsky argues that the U.S. itself engages in terrorism, he calls it state terrorism. The book exposes the brutal realities of U.S. intervention. Particularly it focuses on Central America in the 1980s. Chomsky dismantles the narratives of the U.S. government. He reveals a pattern of violence and oppression. Chomsky meticulously documents how the U.S. used its power. It propped up dictators, it crushed popular movements. Why? To secure its own interests. The book is a powerful reminder. Power often operates in the shadows. It hides behind rhetoric and propaganda. Chomsky challenges us to look beyond the surface. We must confront the uncomfortable truths about our own government. Chomsky's work is grounded in facts and analysis. He presents a wealth of evidence. This evidence exposes the hypocrisy at the heart of U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. condemns terrorism, yet it has often supported and even perpetrated acts of terror itself. This contradiction is at the core of Chomsky's argument. The culture of terrorism is not just a historical analysis, it's a call to action. Chomsky urges readers to question the official narratives. We must hold our leaders accountable for their actions. The book remains as relevant today as it was decades ago. The patterns of state violence and propaganda persist. Chomsky's work is an essential tool. It helps us understand and challenge these abuses of power. Chomsky argues that the U.S. has consistently used terror as a tool. It's a way to achieve its foreign policy objectives. This is especially clear in 1980s Central America. The U.S. backed brutal regimes in El Salvador and Guatemala. These regimes were responsible for horrific human rights abuses. They massacred civilians, they tortured and disappeared dissidents, all with U.S. support. Why? Chomsky argues that the U.S. feared the spread of communism. It also wanted to maintain its economic and political dominance in the region. Any movement perceived as a threat was brutally suppressed. This included democratically elected governments. The U.S. saw them as stepping stones to communism. It used its power to crush them. Chomsky provides a chilling account of the U.S.-backed Contra War in Nicaragua. The Contras were a right-wing rebel group. They were funded and trained by the CIA. Their goal was to overthrow the democratically elected Sandinista government. The Contras engaged in widespread terrorism. They attacked civilians, schools, and hospitals. The U.S. government turned a blind eye. It even actively supported these atrocities. The U.S. justified its actions with the rhetoric of freedom and democracy. However, Chomsky argues that these were just pretexts. The real goal was to maintain U.S. hegemony. The U.S. was willing to support any regime, no matter how brutal, as long as it aligned with U.S. interests. This is the chilling reality of U.S. foreign policy that Chomsky exposes. Chomsky argues that the media plays a key role in legitimizing state violence. It does this by controlling the narrative. The media often parrots the government's line. It presents a sanitized version of events. This shapes public opinion. It manufactures consent for U.S. foreign policy. In the case of Central America, the media largely ignored the atrocities committed by U.S.-backed regimes. When they did cover them, they often downplayed their significance. They used euphemisms. They blamed the victims. They presented the U.S. as a benevolent force. This helped to shield the U.S. public from the true costs of its government's actions. Chomsky argues that this is not an accident. He points to the structural factors that shape media coverage. These include corporate ownership, government pressure, and reliance on official sources. These factors create a filter. This filter ensures that only certain narratives reach the public. These narratives are the ones that serve the interests of the powerful. Chomsky's analysis of the media is as relevant today as it was decades ago. We live in an age of information overload. It's more important than ever to be critical consumers of news. We must be aware of the biases and agendas that shape media coverage. We must seek out alternative sources of information. Only then can we hope to break free from the propaganda model and understand the true nature of state power. Chomsky highlights the glaring double standards in U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. condemns terrorism when it's convenient, but it turns a blind eye when its own allies or interests are involved. This hypocrisy is a central theme in the culture of terrorism. The U.S. condemns groups like Hamas and Hezbollah as terrorist organizations, yet it has supported groups like the Contras in Nicaragua. These groups used similar tactics. They targeted civilians. They spread terror to achieve their political goals. The U.S. even provided material support to these groups. This exposes the hollowness of U.S. rhetoric on terrorism. Chomsky argues that the U.S. has a long history of supporting dictators and authoritarian regimes. These regimes often commit horrific human rights abuses. They do so with U.S. support. As long as these regimes are aligned with U.S. interests, they are deemed acceptable. This exposes the moral bankruptcy at the heart of U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. often justifies its actions by claiming to promote democracy and freedom. However, Chomsky argues that these are just pretexts. The real goal is to maintain U.S. hegemony. The U.S. is willing to support any regime, no matter how brutal, if it serves its interests. This is the uncomfortable truth that Chomsky forces us to confront. Section 5. Echoes of the Past. Central America's Lessons for Today. The lessons of U.S. intervention in Central America remain eerily relevant today. The U.S. continues to intervene in the affairs of other nations. It does so under the banner of democracy and freedom. But often, its actions have devastating consequences. The legacy of U.S. intervention in Central America is one of violence, instability, and poverty. The scars of U.S.-backed wars and coups are still visible today. They serve as a stark reminder of the human cost of U.S. foreign policy. Chomsky's analysis of the U.S. role in Central America provides a framework for understanding contemporary events. The same patterns of intervention, propaganda, and double standards are still evident today. The U.S. continues to support authoritarian regimes that serve its interests. It continues to use its military might to achieve its foreign policy objectives. And it continues to justify its actions with the rhetoric of freedom and democracy. Section 6. Beyond Central America, the global reach of state terror. While Chomsky focuses on Central America in the culture of terrorism, his analysis has global implications. State terror is not limited to one region or time period. It's a pervasive feature of the international system. Chomsky argues that powerful states have always used violence and coercion to maintain their dominance. They have done so under various pretexts. These include national security, economic interests, and the spread of democracy. But the underlying goal is always the same: to preserve their power and privilege. From the Vietnam War to the invasion of Iraq, Chomsky documents a long history of U.S. military interventions around the world. These interventions have often been disastrous. They have resulted in massive loss of life, displacement of populations, and destabilization of entire regions. Chomsky's work challenges us to confront the uncomfortable reality of state power. States are not benevolent actors. They are self-interested entities that will use any means necessary to achieve their goals. This includes violence and terror. Section 7. Challenging the narrative, Chomsky's call to action. The Culture of Terrorism is not just a work of analysis, it's a call to action. Chomsky urges readers to question the official narratives that justify state violence. He encourages us to challenge the structures of power that perpetuate these abuses. Chomsky argues that citizens have a responsibility to hold their governments accountable. We cannot afford to be passive consumers of propaganda. We must be critical thinkers who question everything. We must demand transparency and accountability from our leaders. Chomsky's work is a reminder that change is possible, but it requires active and engaged citizens who are willing to challenge the status quo. We must be willing to speak out against injustice, even when it's uncomfortable. We must be willing to stand up for what is right, even in the face of power. Section 8. The enduring relevance of the culture of terrorism. Decades after its publication, the culture of terrorism remains as relevant as ever. The issues Chomsky raises, state violence, propaganda, and the hypocrisy of U.S. foreign policy, are still with us today. In an age of endless war, drone strikes, and mass surveillance, Chomsky's work is essential reading. It provides a framework for understanding the forces that shape our world. It offers a powerful critique of the abuses of state power. And it reminds us that we have the power to resist. Chomsky's work is a reminder that the fight for justice is an ongoing struggle. It's a struggle that requires constant vigilance and action. We cannot afford to be complacent. We must continue to challenge the powerful and speak out against injustice. Section 9. A Call to Awareness. Unmasking State Violence in the 21st Century. Chomsky's The Culture of Terrorism is a wake-up call. It's a call to awareness. We must be aware of the ways in which state power is used to perpetuate violence and oppression. We must be willing to confront uncomfortable truths about our own governments and societies. The first step towards change is awareness. We must educate ourselves about the history of state violence. We must understand the mechanisms by which it is justified and carried out. Only then can we begin to challenge it effectively. The culture of terrorism is an essential tool in this struggle for awareness. It provides a critical lens through which to view the world. It challenges us to question everything and to demand better from our leaders. In a world saturated with propaganda and misinformation, Chomsky's work is a beacon of clarity and truth. It's a call to action for all who believe in a more just and peaceful world.